Google's new quantum chip is super impressive. On Monday, Google announced its latest quantum chip. It's called Willow. Here's the chip if you haven't seen it.
And so we're now kind of spitting distance or a couple of years away from having computers that theoretically could crack all encryption standards.
I saw Sundar post it. I saw it in my feed. I ended up missing my next meeting because I had to figure out how long will it take for us to crack the encryption standards that we use for Bitcoin. Here's the answer, because I was so tilted by this idea.
Warning to all crypto investors. Share this video with everyone you know. Bitcoin is 2 to 5 years away from being cracked and taken over by quantum computing. At least according to the billionaire tech investors who co-host the All In podcast, Chamath Palihapitiya, David Freeberg, and Jason Calacanis. For context, you need to understand what just happened. Google just released news of their new quantum computing chip called Willow.
Alphabet shares are higher after announcing a quantum computing breakthrough, unveiling its new chip, Willow, which can perform a milestone computing in just 5 minutes' time that would take a classic supercomputer longer than the history of the universe. How do they know if it's longer than the history of the universe? Deirdre Bosa has the full story in today's Tech Check. Deirdre?
Put simply, Google cracked a key challenge that the field has pursued for nearly 30 years, raising the prospect that quantum computing can one day be as transformational as AI. Now, I spoke to Google's VP of Engineering, Hartmut Naveen, this morning, who told me that this breakthrough is essentially an entry ticket. If you can win on abstract problems, that clears the way to win on useful problems. He suggested that some of those practical applications could be in the near future, not 10 or more years away as previously thought. So that's a big deal.
This is a tech advancement light years ahead. Many didn't think this would happen so soon. If you hold Bitcoin, you need to understand this. Google's Willow is a new quantum computing chip that represents a significant advancement in the field of quantum computing. So there are two big tech breakthroughs that make this chip special. Number one, its performance. Willow is claimed to perform a computation in under 5 minutes that would take one of today's fastest supercomputers lifetimes to complete, 10 septillion, 10 to the 25th years to complete. And number two, error correction. See, this is another big breakthrough. One of the major breakthroughs with Willow is its ability to reduce errors exponentially as more qubits are added to the system. This is a significant achievement because traditionally, adding more qubits leads to more errors in quantum computing. Willow has shown that it can scale up the number of qubits while simultaneously reducing the error rate, making it a milestone in quantum error correction that has been pursued for nearly 30 years. So this has always been something that has been a concern to Bitcoin holders. They've always said that once quantum computing gets far enough, the Bitcoin algorithm will be cracked, leaving all our tokens worthless. Some people say this is all a big boogeyman. Quantum computing really isn't or shouldn't be a concern to Bitcoin holders. The hosts of the All In podcast seem to disagree now that Google just released Willow. According to them, they say cracking Bitcoin with quantum computing is closer than ever, especially Chamath Palihapitiya. I'll tell you why in a second, but listen.
Google's new quantum chip is super impressive. On Monday, Google announced its latest quantum chip. It's called Willow. Here's the chip if you haven't seen it. It's beautiful. The headline basically is Willow performed a standard benchmark computation in under 5 minutes that would have taken today's fastest supercomputers 10 septillion years, or 10 to the 25th power, which is billions of times older than the universe.
It is a very kind of important milestone in the evolution of quantum computing. One of the very interesting areas that a lot of people are talking about is in cryptography. There's an algorithm by a professor who was at MIT for many years named Shor. It's called Shor's algorithm. And in 1994, 1995, I think, around that time, he basically came up with this idea that you could use a quantum computer to factor numbers almost instantly. And all modern encryption standards, so all of the RSA standards, everything that Bitcoin's blockchain is built on, all of our browsers, all server technology, all computer security technology is built on algorithms that are based on number factorization. So if you can factor a very large number, a number that's 256 digits long, theoretically, you could break a code. And it's really impossible to do that with traditional computers at the scale that we operate our encryption standards at today. But a quantum computer can do it in seconds or minutes. And so we're now kind of spitting distance or a couple of years. It's not really clear, is it 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, but a couple of years away from having computers that theoretically could crack all encryption standards.
I saw Sundar post it. I saw it in my feed. I ended up missing my next meeting because I had to figure out how long will it take for us to crack the encryption standards that we use for Bitcoin. Nick, here's the answer, because I was so tilted by this idea. So if you think of Willow as essentially like one stable, logical qubit equivalent in a chip, we need about 4,000 to break RSA 2048. And we need about 8,000 to break SHA 256, which is the underlying encryption framework for Bitcoin. So I think you're right. I think we're in the sort of like
the end game?
2 to 5 year shot clock. No, I mean, I think what'll have to happen is some of these chains will need to obviously re-implement something at a pretty foundational level. The weird thing, as Freeberg says, is like the Willow chip's error correction gets better the more of these things you start to use together. Now, there are some really big problems inside these chips, like logical interconnects are very complicated. If you put two chips on a board, like the C2C communication is all this stuff that we haven't figured out how to do, but this is a big deal.
So what's really interesting in this episode is that the fourth co-host, David Sachs, is actually replaced in this episode. He's not present. David Sachs just recently got appointed as Donald Trump's U.S. crypto czar. He'll be working with the White House to promote crypto in the U.S. He was always actually one of the biggest crypto bulls on the All In podcast panel. And yet they conveniently did this episode talking about how Bitcoin is going to break without him. What's even more convenient, and Altcoin Daily is the only one talking about this. Guys, smash the video, and again, send this video to your friends because they need to see this. Chamath Palihapitiya, I don't think, is being genuine. You see, Chamath has deep regrets that he missed out on Bitcoin in such a big way. He was a huge believer 10 years ago. Yes, he made some money, but he sold way too early. Remember Chamath saying this on an episode of All In not too long ago?
For you personally.
Honestly, you know what I think about? I actually think about all the Bitcoin I sold.
Oof. Yeah,
I had Bitcoin. I had a bunch of Bitcoin in my funds when I managed outside capital. Bitcoin and things like it is the equivalent of the red pill. Okay? We are entering a completely world of uncharted water right now.
Have you made any investments in Bitcoin?
So, I mean, I own Bitcoin in my hedge fund. I own Bitcoin in my fund. I own Bitcoin in my private account. It is a huge deal. It's a huge, huge, huge deal. That's a $3 or $4 billion mistake in growing now because my partners at the time capitulated and I wanted to be a good team member and we distributed and it was profitable. But obviously I shouldn't have sold it. Would have made them a lot more money.
Oh, wow. So it seems that Chamath Palihapitiya is pulling a Wall Street billionaire trick as old as time. If you're bullish on Bitcoin and you want to load up on Bitcoin, you don't go out and talk about how great Bitcoin is. You go out and you talk about how unsure Bitcoin's future is. This is just like what the infamous George Soros did with copper.
The oldest trick in the book. If you want to buy a lot of something, what do? You shit on it. Right? When George Soros wanted to corner the market in copper, right? What did he do? He didn't go out and buy a bunch of copper. He went out and sold a bunch of copper and spread rumors that copper was going to zero. Then you swoop in and buy a whole bunch after the price collapses. That's what I think went on last year.
And this is the one clip that's going around, but if you actually watch the full episode, later in the All In podcast, the guest host actually goes on to correct the panel, saying that, hey, you guys are blowing a lot of this way out of proportion in a lot of different ways. And the story of this chip itself, the way Google is telling the story, the way you guys are parroting the story, it's actually not what you're making it seem.
Kit, what are your thoughts
Deep
about
line, yeah.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I think there's a long time before this becomes a commercial product or application of any sort. So, it's great that they're taking money, but think about it as like almost like Stanford takes money or the US government funds basic research in some ways. This is at least a decade out kind of thing. There's another, this area way beyond my expertise, but I've been talking to a lot of smart people because I do financial services innovation. And obviously encryption is pretty critical, whether it's Bitcoin or other places. And there's a couple concerns. One is it's not even clear that you can verify that this is true. by the way. Like standard computing, to explain sort of the magnitude of difference, standard computing would take 10 to the 25th years to verify that what Google announced is accurate. So there's a chance that it's not even true. But
for the sampling test they ran.
Yeah.
Well,
So
the RCS,
they think about that,
to your
10
point,
to the 25th number of years.
That's the big, I think, hole in the whole RCS benchmark that they use, that it only is, it's a framework that only a quantum computer could theoretically even
So how do you know the
answer
answer's correct? Is I guess the
And then,
question.
okay,
if
yeah,
it
then to
takes
be
that long to solve.
And then to be practical, like, so assuming you solve all this and it's accurate and blah, 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 you make it fast. Second, then there is the post-quantum computing encryption, which, a lot of people, a lot of important things have switched over to. So you have historical communications that were encrypted under an old paradigm that would be vulnerable. And, every year that goes by, like the embarrassment level or the threatening level of old historical communications will probably has some decay function or some half-life. So if it takes another 10 years, communications that were drafted 20 years ago, there'll be some embarrassing things and blah, 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 blah. But the more time it takes, the more safe, sort of private communications and exchanges will be. So I think that's positive. Third is there's a question of order of magnitude here. You mentioned you need like 3 orders of magnitude sort of improvement. Is each step function, incrementally easier and faster, or is each step function, 10 years? And I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, a lot more work here to be done.
So Keith, you're not buying any quantum computing stock yet?
Not yet.
Again, I think Chamath Palihapitiya and probably many people in the background who he's working with want to buy Bitcoin at its lowest that they possibly can. We know that BlackRock is trying to suppress the price. I'm going to link this video below. You should watch it. But beyond that, let's actually really talk about quantum computing itself. This is a real technology. Eventually, we will see huge advancements in quantum computing, I believe. So what happens in 10 years? What happens in 20 years? Are we all at risk of losing our money? Well, we actually did an in-depth video on exactly this just a few months ago. If you want the real answers, you need to watch one more video. You need to watch this video. I'm going to link this video as well in the comments. Do yourself a favor and watch it. Again, share this with everyone you know. My name is Aaron at Altcoin Daily. See you tomorrow, my friends.